Hey, it's Alan. I get asked all the time, how exactly does Kadima help people? There are three primary ways. One, we provide one-on-one personalized career coaching with a focus on getting you a great job. Two, we provide an online do-it-yourself course where you can work at your own pace. Three, if you have a job offer, we'll help you negotiate for more. So to find out about these great services and everything else that we offer at Kadima, sign up for our newsletter. Go to sickpodcast.com. That's SYCK podcast.com. I promise you, it'll be the best newsletter to accelerate your career. Thanks a lot.
Live from Brooklyn, welcome to the Sick Podcast, starring Alan Stein, where he steers your career with Kadima. And now, ladies and gentlemen, I have the pleasure of introducing a host that is about to embark on an epic series that's going to change the way you accelerate. And I have accelerate in quotations. Alan, is that accurate?
That is correct, Russ. We are ready to accelerate some careers. So I'm really excited to have on this episode Waziri Garuba. I met him, I think, a year or two ago. I should check my notes, but I forget how I reached out to you. I think you were part of the BBSA Alumni Association from Columbia. I reached out to a few people. You were one of the few people that responded to me and also followed up, and we had conversation, and we've had, it's been awesome getting to know you through. You are a big value of my $138,000 debt to a Columbia Business School. So
thank you very much. I reciprocate. For what I owe on my education there. You're one of the valuable gems I've walked out with that kind of balances.
And we didn't even know each other there. So yeah, but yeah, loved you to introduce yourself to the crowd here.
All right. I'll keep it simple. Waziri Garuba, natively from Nigeria, kind of grew up on the East Coast, New York, New Jersey. Did 10 years, just kind of ran around Wall Street firms and a nonprofit before winding up at Columbia Business School. Got my MBA. 2007 to 2009, I had the pleasure of riding the entire mortgage crisis while in business school. And then graduated and literally globe hopped. I did Brazil. I spent some time traveling and then worked in several roles of renewable energy banking. And I think most notably with Tony Hsieh, a project out in Vegas before settling on Austin and just deciding I only want to work with decision makers for, I guess, the rest of my career. So.
Yeah. And Tony Hsieh, for folks that don't know, created Zappos, which was bought by Amazon. And he had a pretty sad ending. I don't know all the details there, but how do you?
I hate that that's the thing, right? That because he's one of the most amazing people I've ever known. He gave me my shot. He believed in me. And, it's almost like 40, 50 years. It's almost like it's like I was hanging out one day and some kids were like, I was like, do you know who Michael Jackson is? And they're like, yeah, he died in a weird way. Like Whitney Houston. And I was like, oh man, it stinks because these are my heroes. And all you know is this little piece and you miss the moonwalk and I'm your baby tonight. And I feel like that's kind of one of those things that I always try to speak to it. And that he was amazing. And I don't think that in any way tarnishes him. It's just kind of an unfortunate endpoint. But if you look at how many lives he touched, you'd be surprised. I'm one of probably 100,000 people oh yeah, I met Tony. He gave me a chance to come out and work on something and expand my mind. So he was a great guy, definitely.
Yeah, I don't even know the full end story, but I thought it was like dealing with some mental issues and some depression and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, you know what? It's funny because it's why I love CEO. So I remember when I was out there, and then in many situations, you kind of understand once you get closer, what it's like to receive hundreds of emails, thousands of emails. Lives are dependent on decisions you make during COVID. And that's, people, I'm the head boss. I'm like, I don't really want that sword hanging over my head. This is something that, has a price, has a cost, and it's invisible. And I just feel like, in an article I read about how he kind of turned off. Yeah. I mean, since, he was at Harvard, he was crushing it, brains moving a million miles per hour and building businesses that employed people and working to make life better in the city and working with public organizations to just solve problems, just solve them and solve them well too. It's not like he changed industries. And I feel like, even a great mind gets tired of is, and like all of it. And unfortunately, you know, it's easy to say, there's easier ways, there's better ways, but I feel like an important part for us in our journeys is to focus on those benefits and those positives, right? Recognizing that even though this is like part of it, right? The person had their own kind of demons and issues to fight, that, I don't know. It's just like, I like to look at the numbers, like how many days was this person in value?
Yeah.
Bad days. And in many cases, you find that it's kind of like the media spin. It's like the media just picked up on the most negative things, right? There wasn't even like a whole, like, you know, there's like a reel, like it's a 10-minute reel of all the awesome things he did. Right? It's just like hammer down. And that's probably recently, the media just loves putting bad stuff out. It's almost like, you know, one cop does something bad. What about the million people that were helped today across the country? Who cares? They're not going to give it to us because it just, you know, maybe we don't react enough. But I feel like it's that same element that kind of is, you see it in several different areas, but particularly with people who I think I love and respect. So.
Yeah. And we could talk all night about it.
Yeah. Sorry.
But what I'd like to really understand there is, how the hell did you get to know Tony? And how'd that happen? And I don't think that's an unusual pattern for you. I think you've gotten close to some very senior level people in your career.
You know, I don't know. I got to talk to, yesterday we had an event last week, the BVSA 4A, sorry, and we Trailblazer event, and it was with Nicole Pluna Ross.
And what's the organization? And if you don't mind, just like
the 4A, this is the Columbia Business School African American Alumni Association. So we had an event last week with Nicole Pluna Ross, who is, I mean, I love her. She was my boss at Goldman when I was in private wealth management. She was the main reason I got in and didn't get fired, right? Right? Like, she's amazing. And the stuff she said was so impactful. And so she's, you know, first, I think, like, you know, partner at Goldman or so, and, you know, kind of runs, you know, like a huge department and is just very achieved. But I feel like the thing about her, she's authentic. She's extremely authentic. She always was when she was and the reason I went to Columbia is at her suggestion, right? My whole team was primarily her, Marla Stewart, Anthony Spikes, all Columbia grads, right? So how can you not go? She was the BVSA president while there. She was, you know, involved in everything, you know, the stuff we see coming out of Goldman, 10,000 Black women and all this, that's the goal. She's authentic. And when you know she's in an organization like that fighting for you, you know that they're listening, because she's like the representative. She understands in so many ways what it's like to be from our community and in another community and just, you know, and speak truth to power, et cetera. So I feel like being just authentic, I feel like any environment where I can't be authentically me is toxic to me. Not that there's anything wrong with them. Just saying, if I think a decision needs to be made, if I feel like a conversation needs to be had, and I'm too far away to have that conversation, their stuff builds up. And I know this because one of the key things that's happened to me since I left corporate America, people call me to complain about how much they hate their companies. Like name a company, I can tell you, right? I have somebody who works there and I can tell you what you're doing wrong as far as they're concerned, right? And they're only doing that because they can't talk to somebody in the company about it. Right. So like you see that and you get to make decisions. You know, I think you have to realize that, you know, I hate here, well, you're staying there and you're getting a paycheck. And then for me as an entrepreneur, it's like, don't call and complain to me about how those people who give you money and put it in your bank account every 2 weeks for doing something you don't like. Like, you get money, you know, like that's the price. Deal with it. Can you be authentically you? Like, are you being, you know? And so when I met Tony, I was in business school, or I was wrapping up. Yeah, I was in business school. And it was just an authentic conversation. I just, you know, we just talked about things and he told me stuff he was working on. And at that point,
where do you bump into him? Like just at the Eurostelli?
No, I cannot, honestly, I can't remember. I think it was on a school day, and I think I left class and somebody invited me somewhere, and boom, like Saturday, I bumped into a guy named Worley, super amazing guy. I met him before, but like Worley is Worley. Like he's like got his own Wikipedia page, research him. But like, you know, when you're there and you're like sitting next to somebody, you got 30 minutes to kill. Talk about something interesting, right? And that's generally just what the conversation, I think, jumped from climate change to cities. Yes, we would talk about cities all the time. I was born in Lagos, right? I've lived in Sao Paulo, I've lived in Brooklyn, I've lived in Harlem. I'm like, oh, I get cities, right? Like this is my thing. And he was at that point, I think, doing work in Vegas and, wherever Zappos launched and so on and so forth. So we got into that conversation. We wound up meandering for day, back and forth email. And at that point, I kind of knew who he was. I was like, yeah, he's Zappos. I didn't know like Zappos was like huge. I was like a kid living in Brooklyn. And here goes this guy. So I was in Harlem during B school. So got cool. Told him I was going to work in Brazil after business school. And I went down there and worked for a guy named Carlos Matias Martins, who's also a CBS grad.
What's his name?
Carlos Matias Martins. I was actually just texting him today. He's a Columbia grad in Brazil, and he's like a leading guy in structured carbon credits and large hydro water projects. So I'm down in Brazil for, a long stretch of time working on stuff and working with the United Nations, FCC folks on like, how do we weight, remember like WACC, weighted average cost of capital? I was working like really weird exotic, like how do you calculate the weighted average cost of capital for something that doesn't really exist and then carbon credits and 1,200 tons. So just weird math, right? But you're trying to figure out how to value this. And Tony's just keeping up on all of it. He's like, oh, what are you doing? And how much, what do you think going to be in the price? And after all that, he goes, why don't you come out and work, the downtown project, right? And that was just cool. I went out there. It was fun. It was awesome. Vegas is a different animal. It's not an animal I want to tussle with for long. So man, I was Julia, my wife. We were engaged at that point. Yeah, I just had to make a call, and it wasn't Vegas. It wasn't Vegas, but I did say I'm going to stay in a part of America where I can have cheap brisket and beer, and then I found Austin, and the story,
Nice. But so your buddy knew Tony, or how did, and I forget the guy's name
I was introduced to him, everything. I was introduced to Tony because I worked on some project. Like they'd have these projects where you could work on like a foreign project. And we worked on this farm, Choranye Bakune farm, I think in Rwanda. So a group of us worked on that project, and I was supposed to go, but I couldn't because I was going to like the UAE. And then somebody that was on that team that liked the way I worked, because I was very passionate. I mean, anything in Africa, I'm passionate about. I'm from Nigeria. But he's the one, I think, might have been Rustam, who got me in the room and said, oh, I want you to go. I think it was like I was assigned to go spend an afternoon with Tony while he was in New York City. And somebody just said, hey, so I show up, and I just can't remember what the exact event was.
Yeah.
But I had to go spend some time. And, for that day, I got to talk to him. And, next thing, and what's so funny is that probably a year later, that same contact got me to spend I got to spend like an afternoon with Bill Clinton.
Really?
Yeah. It's so weird. I talked to him about this in business school. We were working on this children's cartoon called The Adventures of Ada and Aya. And randomly, twin Nigerian kids, boy and girl. I wound up having twins years later. But the Africa business competition plan when I was in business school happened, and everybody was, Africa needs infrastructure. I was like, Africa needs education because we got a lot of kids. And like not just education and entertainment, if we could just tie them all together. So we came second place. We wound up, literally my partners, Cheyenne and Julie Hussein, she was Julie Stokely then, and Michael Messina. I mean, we got that thing published on airplanes all over Europe and Africa. I think we got published in China. We had meetings with Sesame Street. We had a deal pretty much, to do something on BET, an interstitial where we'd introduce it. And we were in 2008, like pretty much on the forefront of like, this is African entertainment, made by, a bunch of MBAs. And I got to talk to Bill Clinton about that. So that was really cool. I think I had him on videotape, and he was like, oh, I really like that. I love Nigeria. And we were just like yapping for like 30 minutes. And then he went on stage. So.
Awesome. And were you born in Lagos?
Yep.
And when did you come over to the States?
Ooh, I was back and forth. So my mom worked in the civil service. She was a diplomat. And, from day one, it was like, you're Portugal, you're not New York, you're back here, you're, New Jersey, you're back here, you're over there. So I kind of grew up moving around a lot. New York was very, very familiar to me just because we kept winding up there because of the United Nations. So it was like, my aunt lived like, dang, what's that street in Brooklyn where it's like a carnival?
Eastern Parkway?
Eastern Parkway. Yeah, she lived off Eastern Parkway. So we were there for like a year, and then Lagos, and then back, and then Kaduna, and then back, and then Jersey. And so I kind of was very familiar with the area. And then we kind of came here. Things got funky in Nigeria. I think we finally came to Alaska when I was like 12 or so. And then we wound up in Secaucus, New Jersey,
So you came and settled in the States when you were 12, like after all the back and forth?
Yeah. 13. I haven't gone back since I was 12, 13.
Yeah. Okay.
Right before high school,
Yeah. So what did you go to business school for? What was the intent of you choosing business school, and why did you choose Columbia versus some other options?
Yeah, no, great question. I had done the Wall Street thing. So I came out, my first day of work, by the way, coming out of college was September 10th, 2001. The second day of work was September 11th, 2001. In Merrill, down at the world. So like, it was like, okay.
And you were living in Jersey before that?
I was living in Jersey City.
Yeah.
Right? I graduated St. Peter's University, now St. Peter's College, now St. Peter's University, in Jersey City, right? And everybody's dream was to go work on Wall Street. So you got to graduate from St. Peter's, you try to get a job on Wall Street at Cantor Fitzgerald or any of those places. And September 11th was pretty much my class's wake up call to like, oh. So, it was very interesting. And I did, some time at Merrill. Then the market burned down. I wound up working at SEO, Sponsorship Educational Opportunity, for a brief time. And then I wound up back at Goldman. Well, I wound up at Goldman in private wealth for a bit. And then, somehow I did the 30-second pitch to the CEO in the elevator. It's like me and Hank Paulson for like X amount of seconds. And I'm like, I think you should da-da-da-da-da. I talked my way back into trading. And I wound up on the Spirit Leads Kellogg team, kind of down with the specialists on the NYSE. And so, during that time, I saw, I was a hybrid generation. So hybrid was have your bags ready in December. I literally, when I got on Wall Street, like we were trading eights, right? So I interned at a fixed income firm in college, right, called GX Clark in Jersey, government security bonds. Like I kind of knew what I was doing. I was like playing my own money in like high school and college, investing. And then in college, E-Trade came out. I took some of my brother's money and I started playing around in that. I was really into memory. I was like EMC storage. And, and this is like, if you grew up, it was like the Zune versus the iPad. But it was the first time I realized, I was like, we were going to be generating data at like massive rates because I want to have 1,000 songs on this thing. So that was literally like my smart calls as a junior guy on the Merrill NASDAQ desk. And then, you jump that. My fascination with technology has not stopped. My desk is just full of Arduinos and Raspberry Pis and like weird.
Well, it's all in Blur, but I'll take your word for it.
It's all in a Blur. All of it's right here. Like this is a multimeter, right, that I keep.
Okay.
So like I've always had that fascination. But when I got to trading on the stock exchange, I realized two things. That, my ADD would not let me say I'm going to go work at one company and I'm going to be happy there for 25 years until they fire me, right? I'd seen enough then that I knew that people's time at companies would be shorter moving forward. I also knew that markets that were promising would continue to shrink. So that the eights down to the 16s, down to the decimalization, dimes and then pennies. And then, so I'm seeing it. And then like, I'm on the stock exchange for Goldman and they're just laying off my team in waves, right? Because these things called the hybrids. It was a box and they put a box next to you as you trade. And the box is literally an algorithm. It's like reading how you trade. And then they'd take your job, right? Like eventually. So it was, clear signal. This is not, I don't know how many people are still on the NYSE, but most of it is now black boxes and a bunch of other, technologies. So I decided at that point that trading stocks is great, but, if you're not close to the decision maker, if you're not able to affect the situation, you're in danger. You're always in danger, right? If you have this skill set where decision makers want to hear what you have to say because you've truly put in the time, not just like, okay, I'm very good at Facebook marketing. No, I'm good at marketing via digital platforms that leverage, behaviors, affinities, and demographics to, XYZ. That basically covers them all. That's LinkedIn. That's all of them, right? And you have to step back to understand that. And so jobs today, they're specializing us for stuff that is rapidly, constantly going extinct. And very, CEOs, like when they say your CEO is like, oh, so you understand the accounting. You can't say no. You understand the operations? You can't say no, right? Your job is to understand how this whole thing runs. And that's why you're CEO. Well, you have to be able to have a conversation with people who know how it all works and show that you have some idea of why what you're doing, what they're asking you to do plays into that. And that became clear to me working PWM, right? And then
PWM?
Private wealth at Goldman. And then, my decision to go to business school was like, all right, this is nice, but I need to figure out how to run it and where I'm most valuable in it. Right. And so I was blessed. I got the Morgan Stanley fellowship. So Morgan Stanley paid for me to leave Goldman. And then I went to business school and spent the summer at Morgan Stanley. And so I get to business school and I'm like, I want to be BBSA president. Yeah, run. And like
BBSA is a Black Business School Association.
Yeah. So I'm president. And literally that summer, I think I win the presidency. And then like it's June and I'm working at my first like week at Morgan Stanley. The markets just start blowing up, right? June 2008, right? And at the end of this summer, I remember so vividly, I'm having all these correspondences with the former president, Andre Benjamin. I think he just left Goldman too. The BBSA has a very, very strong track record of getting folks from Columbia Business School into Goldman, because a lot of the BBSA folks wind up at Goldman, right? But I decided I'm leaving, and then Morgan Stanley goes under. He's like, reach out to Lehman Brothers, make sure you get a check because they owe the BBSA. And at the end of the summer, Lehman Brothers just gone. Right. And then like not too much longer, Bear Stearns is gone. And I walk into the BBSA presidency like, your account is negative. Like you owe us money. So there's this whole rally for us to kind of touch bases with alum, try to raise money to get ourselves out of the negative. But like I literally was the president that watched like all the firms burn down and we never got our checks. Right. So I just kind of at that point, when I thought about like, I don't get me wrong, I love and respect Morgan Stanley, but I knew after business school, I was like, I'm done. I'm done with this. I didn't see myself like fitting into the culture of like consulting at like the McKinseys and BCGs. I'm just too me, I guess.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I always have the impression of you of being a tech guy, because I think you're involved in like the Austin tech scene and like with Tony Hsieh and others. So how did you do you call yourself a finance guy, a tech guy?
I'm a Nigerian tech guy, right? Which is like, again, take away all the fancifulness, right? Just a good friend of mine, Hsieh Fabode, years ago, he's Nigerian. And I play with Arduino. So he comes over and we go just for gits and shiggles, let's test our water. We test the water here. And this is after Austin has like a water ban thing, because we couldn't drink our water. And like, I got like abnormally high levels of lead. And I have young twins at that time. So I'm concerned. So I wire up an Arduino, I order some stuff, and I build this little Arduino, like quality water tester with my Arduino. And Hsieh and I joke about it. I'm like, yeah, go ahead, use it, take it to Nigeria, build a business off of it. I want a piece. Well, Hsieh, Varuna IoT, just, Google, the business has blown up. He's now working with utilities. But I'm like, there's a problem and technology can fix it. That's it. Like when people, problem, solution, right? Algorithm, mechanical, Arduino IO ports. I don't really look at it as, to box myself in. I want to solve problems, and technology's there, right? So if I build a tech firm, it doesn't mean I'm a tech person. It just still means I'm a business person who's using tech. Right. My sister is a cardiothoracic surgeon at Johns Hopkins. And, she comes to visit in Houston, and they've got these new like things where she's doing the surgery, because, when they get fatigued, it's hard, but they're doing the surgery with these like devices, and they can do it from across the room.
Like a joystick.
Yeah, it's like a joystick. And I'm like, yeah, you're like, you're a doctor, but you're tech enabled, right? Like that's in every single case, that's the way I look at it. I think that there's just a way of sexing it up. Like there's always like Silicon Valley and a lot of places, they sexy up things. And I like to take that veneer off. Like you're not saving the world. You're using this technology to solve a problem. Are we going to stop COVID with this? No, Mother Earth is very good at cooking up viruses and stuff. So you're not saving all human life. You're just forestalling this battle that will continue to go on, where we just need to get better at creating technologies that keep us alive in a hostile environment. And you just happen to know how to, point. So it's not to discredit it, but, I want to bring it back down to earth, especially in Austin. There's too much ego around what I think should be like the work of God. Like we're blessed to have this. When you think about most other places where they don't have electricity, it's like, not to say you're nothing special, but like if you had to go against this kid who has electricity 3 days out of the week, right? That's where the technology needs to be, not in making sure that your itches are all scratched and stuff. Like I kind of
warm.
There's that element of it's like the technology I think should and is an enabler that hasn't allowed our planet to support 8 billion lives, right, by improving our food sources and so on and so forth. I feel like we play into the vanity if we start making it all about like fancier cappuccinos and better hookup dates and stuff. Glad people are doing that, but once it starts to feel to me like the mortgage crisis. I'm like, oh, we're now using it for totally ridiculous, stupid stuff. Okay, here comes the crash because we don't really need this stuff. This is the edge, but it's somehow become the main thing. Same way mortgages are supposed to help families own homes. It shouldn't become some elaborate derivative cooked up by computers somewhere that could probably be wrong. So,
yeah. Before you were talking a little bit about getting to Tony Hsieh, getting to decision makers. Not everybody has the opportunity to hang out with Bill Clinton and Tony Hsieh, and I'm sure you have lots of other great people there. When you mentor a lot of people that are coming out of business school or maybe thinking about going to business school, your career has been quite unique and you've done amazing things and you're doing lots of things. But most people work at a company, or not most people, a lot of people work at companies. For people, and you've worked for companies over the time, like over your years before business school, what advice do you give people as they are thinking about their career, like either to work at a company, to do, I don't know if you call yourself like a portfolio career type thing, like you call yourself a Nigerian technologist. But you're probably not advising a lot of people to be a Nigerian technologist as their career.
let me not even leave that phrase on the table. Let's pull that back. Tinkerer or many other phrases come to mind, but I'll put it this way. Your kids won't remember your title. What they'll remember is the general impact, like your general state of being. And I find that every day when I wake up to do work, there is a way I can approach it that leaves me fulfilled at the end of the day. And there's a way that doesn't. What leaves me fulfilled, even when I was working at GS or any of the other places, was being able to have frank conversations with my team, all senior, and say, this is what needs to get done. I'm excited about it. Where I'm not excited about it, I can let you guys know, but I'm going to get it done. And then, we'll have a conversation. We'll follow up. And so my first period of time there was difficult. I'll be honest with you, my first year at Goldman, I was probably on my way out on their end and my end. I was like, I don't know if this is working. But I read a great article in Harvard Business Publishing on managing your boss. And I had really frank conversations with my boss, Marla, at the time. And I love her. She kind of embraced where I was coming from and said, why don't we give this a timeline and we'll get you where you want to go, so on and so forth. And that was a relationship with my manager that made me want to be my best. So I think that's the first thing. She was a decision maker. But she and I got to an agreement where I could be my authentic self. And when I wasn't doing right, she could kind of do that. And it kind of set me off on a trajectory where she said, I want you to go to Columbus. I want you to go to Square Show. What I need you to do is get in tomorrow and handle this stack right here, right? And you do that year after year, and you feel like your manager respects you or not. and then you can have conversations. You know, when I'm 45, I don't really want to just have somebody like you tell me what to do, you know? And so I got to have conversations with her and with Nicole and others, Anthony Spikes, et cetera, like that. And they made it clear to me, right? Thing from INTJ, whatever, I'm Myers-Briggs, I'm actually INTJ. So I was like, you're E. I'm like, no, I'm I. I like working from home by myself for years at a stretch. I'm I. But, you know, they knew me as a colleague. And then I spent a lot of time knowing me too, right? Actually, there's a book, you know, is it Buckingham? There's all these books that help you understand. Like
Marcus Buckingham, like the strength finder.
Yeah, I spent literally a year or two kind of in that space when I was not in the office and I was not getting prepped to go to business school. So it was just work, right? Going work all day, whatever it takes, you know, take a few things, understand where you're going, and then begin having conversations where what you have to lose is less than what you will lose if you don't, you know, I know that at 40 or 50, this is how I want to be. Everybody agrees with me. You know, I am most likely not going to be doing that. So what careers, what lifestyles exist that will allow me to do this? And I think that no matter what age you are, if you have a good board of directors around you that can have those conversations with you, right? They give you insights. They start to lay a path out to you. Well, you know what it was? It's PE. And I was like, I don't know. You know, you could be an operator, you could be a builder. I'll throw another random name at you, right? Ray McGuire. I had a pleasure of meeting Ray McGuire. I think he just ran for mayor, but he was a senior guy at Citi at the time. And I did MLT. So we got this whole afternoon.
That's management leadership tomorrow.
Right? So I get this afternoon to kick with Ray McGuire, and he's awesome. He's like a hero of mine. And I start talking to him and I say, hey, you know, I just finished up with Goldman. I'm going to B school. And after I'm done, he goes, sounds like you should be an operator. Doesn't sound sexy, you know, but just operate. Learn how to run a business. Because all the fancy guys, we still need that. We still need people who come in, and it's not about titles. It's about, I got it done, right? And I started studying for my PMI, project management certification. It's like, I just want to get it done. I want to have that sense. And so if you have a manager or a boss that doesn't understand how you think, your strengths and weaknesses, they can't understand how you can be best utilized in the company. But if you're like, no, I'm like, I want to one day do this, then they know when they put you in this box or X that where they put you has consequences, right? And that's oftentimes what I find later on when I see on both ends, people are like, I can't keep talent. I'm like, because you keep putting them in the box and they're telling you they don't want to be there. Or I hate my boss. I'm like, because he doesn't know that you're passionate about this because you can't be your authentic self. And it's bridging that gap. So finding where your relationship with your manager, and I honestly put this on the employee. You have to find where you can have those authentic conversations with your manager at the very least. It is your responsibility because it never comes easy. Like somebody called me today and said, do you think I should join this board, so on and so forth? What's the benefit? And I was like, oh, you think the benefit's like, right? No, I go, every board, you generally walk away with one or two good relationships, right? After the years of doing that, you have many people who can speak to your work style, who can speak to and about you to others, and that's how you broaden your network. So what are you looking to achieve 4 to 5 years from now with the network and the relationships you're going to build in this board that you're joining, right? What are you looking to get from that manager? If you keep walking away from jobs like, I just meet my man, something's wrong with you. You can't just meet that many crappy managers where you couldn't find any common ground, right? To say, yeah, you know, there might be that really weird, like when I was 20 something, everyone who got upset because you mentioned business school was like, are you sure you want to work on Wall Street? Because that's what we're all thinking, right? So for me, when I brought up business school to my managers at Goldman, they were ecstatic. They were like, you should go to our business school, right? And it was like, no surprise, I went to Columbia. But it's because we could have that honest conversation. I don't know if this is just, you know, particular to Goldman, but like everywhere I've worked, I wanted to be somewhere where let's not act like I'm going to be here in 20 years. Probably won't. And I think that if you're in a place where you say that and people look at you funny, stop. Just stop. Because, you know, and this isn't about us at this point. This is a company. It's like, yeah, right. Give me a company that's like, oh, we're going to take care of you. Like, this is in 1956 USA, right? So there's just that element of knowing that if you live to that point, you'll want your life to be a certain way. And then being confident enough to have those conversations with your personal board of advisors and to present to your manager, where your wandering might take you, such that they give you the, hey, I want to take that project on. I love the Middle East. Maybe one day I'll work there for the company, right? But I got handled a lot of really great stuff because they knew that I wasn't there to be a career, like I want to be in this department. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And I don't think they didn't think anything was wrong with that. And so that just speaks to the culture. That speaks to a lot of self-assessment, I think, is probably another part of it, right? Which I was reading a book, Being the Boss. It's a Harvard Business Publishing article. And everything I've encountered, it's always like, you have to do this, you have to do that. And then you look back and they're like, now here's what you have to go do with yourself, right? You want to be CEO? It's you. Are you good with people? Do you suck with them? So on and so forth. And so that self-assessment truly benefits you, because when you're having those honest conversations with your boss over drinks at the Christmas party, or you're stuck in that elevator with somebody, your 30-second pitch is just, it's ready. You're like, oh, I always thought I'd go to business school, but I didn't know. What do you think I should do? Do you think I should apply to your? And then they're like, well, I wouldn't want to lose you, but if you were going to go, I'll write your recommendation. And I think those conversations are ones where you have to approach. There's that saying, if you want to be a friend, if you want to have a friend, be one. Like there's a moment where you can have a tough boss, but still have a respectful relationship, where the hard truths and the real conversations, those are two things you should not be scared to have. And they shouldn't be scared to have it too, if you can do it as adults. And so I think that's my advice to the career goes. And don't get me wrong, because I work at every company, but most places I've worked, I can honestly say, yeah, this is where I'm good. Give me more work here. I'll do it on weekends, right? But I'm not drinking too much of the Kool-Aid, so this doesn't seem to make sense, And they, in whatever scenario, kind of said, yeah, you're right. And then we both had the understanding locked in.
So what impresses me about you, which I'm still trying to learn how to do in terms of, I've had some shitty bosses. Mm-hmm. I have not been as effective as you have about taking ownership of that. It sounds like you read this book, Managing a Boss, you mentioned by HBS, and turning it around. So have you, every boss relationship that you've had, has it always ended positively?
No. Oh, no. Whether for them or for me, I might have walked away and they're like, that guy sucks. But no, it hasn't. But you know what I will say? My wife is my boss, okay? Like, she's the CEO of Urban Root, and I work for my boss. But she likes me, right? So I feel like that's where, what's so funny? That was Tony Hsieh's advice. He was like, well, your wife has a business, why don't you work for her? And I was like, what? And then I had another mentor named Charles Pardue. And Charles he's big news. He's like an amazing guy. He was like a father to me growing up in Maplewood. And my brother was the victim of a shooting and so on. So during that time, he was very much a father, and he always gave me great advice. And so I called him, and I think one of our last conversations when we moved here to Austin, I said, I want to start an advisory business. My wife has this business where she's selling like oils and like da-da-da-da-da. And he goes, and he sits for quiet and he goes, work for your wife. And I go, what? And then he just breaks it down. He's Princeton, and I don't know where he got his MBA, but genius. And he goes, listen, your wife's products can sell while you sleep. Here's what I understand about consulting. You're not going to do that well. He goes, the main thing you got to do was just check your ego, right? Shut up and listen to your wife. Do what she said. Right? He was dead right. Whatever success I have comes out of the strategy set. I worked for my wife on Urban Root for several years. The business is now, we're on Amazon, we're on Walmart.com, we're looking at HEB and so on and so forth. But, we fight. It's not easy. But the thing is that we have a framework. I've developed a framework with managers or people who are in charge that makes them have to respect what I say, right? I'm the minority stakeholder, okay? And I say this to my wife, she hates it because she owns 51% of the company, out for 9%. I'm just a minority stakeholder. But just you don't have to take what I say. I'm not going to say I told you so more than I need to, but this is the reality outside of us. And a lot of times I get to do that, like outside of us. I don't know any other CEO that would do that and get away with it. And so if your feelings are this, that, and the other, it's fine. And with managers, I feel like if a manager didn't like me, it's because I did that to them. Like, no, you're gonna be here, bro. They can fire me. I don't act like you're not hot shit. Outside of here, all you guys are tight, right? Now, if you want me to work on the weekend, right, understand why I'm complaining. But don't come down, because now we're in a personal space. And that's what is oftentimes too forgotten in corporate America. If you hate worker for you, it's because you just don't respect like them saying, I have a right to be upset. And if you show empathy, I'll by all means, I want you to do better. I don't want them to think that but don't act like, well, we pay you. So do they. So can they. So, and when you do that, you're like, well, how dare they? You walk out of the room as a manager thinking you want them. Like, no, you didn't. And I've seen that in so many ways at this level, like young, small CEO. So when you see the way, really powerful people treated, Tony Hsieh's respectful of people around him, I'm like, you don't have to act like this. If you haven't learned that yet, I can't work for you, right? And those people who get it, like, can we do this? Can we shift it? So on and so forth. They're a pleasure to work for. And then we don't have to have those uncomfortable conversations because we're just too busy making money together or working together, or, and it doesn't feel like a manager, like subservient situation. It feels like we're all on the same team. And so my wife and I, we always work on our business, but I don't feel like, oh my God, my boss needs me to, it's like, it's my wife. But in this situation, she's the boss. And I will not challenge her. And she suggests something, I'll do it, and I'll work late. But she respects me in all these other scenarios. And therefore, she accrues the respect that I give her. I mean, I've got clients now that, these CEOs, they're making a few $1 million a year. We talk often. And guess what? It's all love. And how are you doing as your mom? I heard you. Okay, don't worry. Push the meeting off. I understand why you're busy. We'll book extra hours. I'll make time. And it's a back and forth, right? But it's because I know that they're trying to get something done. I know they're human. I appreciate and accept their flaws. And if we can have those honest conversations where our eye is, the baby needs to be protected. I want your business to do this. But the way you're acting could possibly endanger that. And let me explain why. And I feel like now, my name means advisor. It's Vizier. Like, like Aladdin, like my name means like right-hand man. So it's like, hey, listen, you can do that. They'll kill you. Go ahead. I'm not going to stop you, bro. But like, it's my nature. It's like, and I say this to friends. I'm like, I'm kind of like a little wizardy kind of character. Like, you're on your ship. No, don't go into the rocks. If you do that, you're going to die. Boof, sorry. I got to go. I got other clients. Because what I'm trying to do is steer us all to shore. And there's best methods. I study my case studies. I'm still reading my HBR magazines. I'm just trying to give you the advice, and I could be wrong, but your job is just to take it as a CEO should. Absorb all the inputs, try to understand what's best, and have empathy with the people that are working for you. Because, we have to deal with your bad mistakes. That's one of the things here. Like, everybody is affected by your dumbass mistakes, Mr. or Mrs. CEO. So somebody in the room should be able to tell you that and not be a yes man, because that's what you're paying for. And I feel like if I'm stuck with a job, then I lose, like, if I'm stuck with a job in one company, I lose that ability to be like, all right, it's time to just shoot straight. You might throw me off the boat, but they're going to pick me up in about 20 minutes. So you can just go ahead and deny the realities, or, listen to me, and maybe I'm right. Maybe I'm right.
So you say that your name means advisor, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, it basically means prime minister in Swahili. But if you look back at history, you'll find that vizier, like Joseph in the Bible is the vizier to the Pharaoh. You'll see vizier in Aladdin. The guy who advises the Sultan is the vizier, right? We could be good, we could be bad, but generally the name has some responsibilities with it.
So
I discovered this. Go ahead.
It sounds like you've soaked up a lot of information, a lot of mentorship, a lot of advisors in your life. And I know you're someone that gives it back. I'm sure a lot of people reach out to you for help and support. What's your policy about supporting people when they reach out, and what makes you more, like, you're a busy dude, you have 3 kids, You're running business, you're running it Harlem Labs. What makes you return someone's request to you versus not, or do you always return them?
I have the Shema from Deuteronomy up, like, hero Israel, the Lord our God. And then there's this phrase.
I'm a Jew. I know that. That's one of the prayers I know.
Yeah.
And they're like two prayers. That's one of them.
Yeah. Apparently, that's the one that gets drilled into us. I'm Catholic, so Shema is huge to me, especially in my family. And that phrase, "Love thy neighbor as you love thyself," is that I'm human, so there's times where people kind of reach out to me. I think LinkedIn's become an issue because people are just like, the way they reach out, it's like some of it lately, the 10% has become a little crappy. But generally I get warm introductions through somebody. And in those cases, I give the time, right? Somebody gave the time for me, and I don't know when and where. If I'm going through like a hectic period, I might like, hey, listen, let's do a 20-minute call, and I might miss it and then call you back, or. But I generally get introduced to people through somebody I know, and generally I get enough background to know it's important. So I rarely miss an opportunity to give advice. I don't like to speak 3-4 times. Like, I meet somebody young and they're like, hey, can I help you? I'm like, yeah, cool. His young brother in town. I met him at a founders event, helped him out, introduced him to people. He just got a job at a VC firm, right? So during that period, he texted me 3-4 times, but that's cool, right? Now, I might not be able to speak to him in the next month or two because I just go work. Just like, there's no advice I could give you. So it becomes a thing, and I've learned some mentorship that in the beginning, it's very like, 5, 6, 7 conversations. And then you kind of send them on their way, give them a couple books. And, 2 months later, hey, I got a job. 7 months later, hey, I hate my job. Okay, read this book, managing your boss. 4 years later, I want to go to business school. Okay, cool. Do this. It generally doesn't take like a long period, a lot of time consistently. There's an upfront period where you get to know each other, maybe 3 to 4 hours in the first quarter of, talking, phone call, coffee. And then after that, it peters off where if you've given them great advice, they start winning, right? Like, and that's the thing is like, a lot of people don't ever look, but like some Annika Pandy, like there's so many people who are doing so well now. And I'm so happy that I just got to like push them along. I mean, maybe Tony Hsieh will see me one day from heaven and, damn, I remember that big-headed African dude. I told him to do that. And it worked, right? Because I was hungry enough to ask, and all he had to do was put me on. And now people think that somehow I'm special. I'm not special. I just got some of his dust on the back of my jacket and he pushed me forward. And I feel like it's the same way with a lot of the people that I'm introduced to, where it doesn't absorb that much time. Oftentimes, God is good. It's like, oh, I'm looking for a job. My friend Alan is hiring. Oh, surprise. Right. That's happened a few times. Right. Even recently with a good friend of mine who I sat on the board with, I was able to put him into a great job because at the moment he reached out to me, a friend of mine was like, I can't find anybody. And it was like, wow, that's a win. So in many cases, I'm about connections, right? Like this life is about the people you connect with. And I've heard many people say that the titles what matters, that you'll think back about all the warm, fun conversations with people you had. And, if that's your outro and you had a hell of a lot of good conversations with people that actually liked you, then you have a good time. And so there's that. Now, the social has made it kind of weird because a lot more people can reach me than I'd like who just want money, right? So now I get a lot of like, hey, Harlem Labs, like, you want to hire us, or hire Chris on LinkedIn, and I want to help you get more clients. That feels not genuine. That feels like there's an angle. And I'm learning to just kind of, can't talk right now. But when it comes to like, I would say generally junior people who are trying to figure out, how to get into a good business school, get a job that matters to them and start kind of that, there's usually the time because as I'm learning, there's usually somebody on the other side in my network who wants to know that person. And all I have to do is understand both their interests well enough to make the connection. Oh, you want to work in PE? Really? Seriously? My book was just telling me, right? And then all of a sudden, boom, boom, boom. Oh, you want to actually, do this? And Sam was just telling me that the school's going to have that. So rarely do I find that within a year or two, there's not some way for me to plug them in to somebody I know who could utilize that passion and time and energy in a way that's meaningful. So,
yeah. So you used a quote before we started taping of not all who wander are lost. Is that a quote from somebody that I'm not familiar with, or is that?
I don't even know where I got that one. I think I
Okay.
got that one. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but like it seems like a lot of your connections, at least that you've shared here, are very serendipitous. It's not like you're like, I got to meet Tony Hsieh or I got to meet Bill Clinton. Because like I just recently read Keith Ferrazzi's book about Never
Mhm.
Eat Alone. I don't know if you read that book.
Oh yeah, I keep giving that. Used to give me that book. Somebody like walked up and said, "You need to read this." So yeah.
Yeah. And he takes a more almost methodical approach about reaching the people that he wants to do. But yours seems almost you're in good places and serendipitously you bump into folks. Have you ever wanted to connect with specific people and like figured out strategically how to leverage the network you have to find them? Or like there must be some times where you're like, I got to meet Robert Johnson or something like that. And I think you may know him.
What's so funny is there's a certain gentleman who I said to a friend, he's somebody I would really like to meet. He lives here in Austin. He's a CBS grad, very powerful guy. And 2 days later, my friend hits me and says, I was just having dinner with him and I talked to him about you. And then I got an email intro. And so I emailed him. Cool.
But then it was almost like you didn't try that hard. You just like
it's not even, you know what? It's weird because I'm a big there's this series coming out, The Ring of Time, I think it is, or it's Randall Thor, and there's gonna be a movie going on. But there's this term Tavaran, which is that it's about gravity, right? Like the universe is a web, it's interconnected web. And if you feed the right things into your head, you start to have gravity. So you start to kind of pull on the web and things start to roll towards you, in essence. And I feel like one of my heroes is Miyamoto Musashi. He's the Miyamoto Musashi is what you call he's one of the leading, or I would say the sword prince or saint, the sword saint. So he's one of the most recognized like battle warriors in Japanese history. And he has a book called The Book of Five Rings. I love it. But, he talks about the way of the samurai is like eating when hungry, doing things when necessary. Not for this, not for the intention of like for me, but just because it's valuable. And so my interest, I'm a big quantum physics, like physics junkie and fan. And I had the most amazing conversation with Worley this past weekend, right? Because that's like my world, man. I find this stuff interesting. So when I meet somebody and we're talking about it, the intention wasn't to meet you, to impress you with it. I really want to know exactly what, is happening in this scenario and you happen to know, or I happen to have some insight. And so our conversation is back, once again, genuine. It's authentic. I'm authentically curious. Now, if you and I can help each other, then that happens naturally. And I feel like, when I think about my longer term vision, African diaspora, my visions of bringing education and resources and technology to those friends of mine I left behind when I was 12 in Lagos, it's about having genuine partners who see, there's this term I think that we're seeing in supply diversity about capitalization, the capitalization rate of the human talent, right? Like if we can unlock that human capital by bringing the right resources, we can change the world. Because I look at Africa and that's a young generation, young population, that will be a large consumer base and that will be decision makers and business creators and so on and so forth. Well, if I can affect them with true partners who recognize that I didn't ask you, Alan, to come work with me in Accra on something or in Austin, because it makes sense to you, right? And it makes sense to me. So we're truly partners. I'm not using you. I'm not abusing you. I just believe this is where we should be. This is where the universe put us and we can have impact. And I found that, it's like getting married, right? Like when you met your wife, you were like, yo, make sure she marries me, has 2 kids. You're like, yo, I just really find you interesting. Right? I like the way you act and you talk and you move. And then years later, you're like, yo, I want to marry you. Right. And so I feel like that's the relationship. Those are the relationships that have been best for everyone, in my opinion. And I feel like I approach connecting with people in that way. I'm just truly genuinely interested in what you have to say. I'm really genuinely interested in what you're doing, right? From when we spoke. So I reached out, you reached out. Foray puts me on the forefront, right? Because I'll build a website, I'll answer the emails and so on and so forth. Because I'm the person that can say, oh, Alan, you need to speak to Sam. You need to speak to this person. Because when I speak to Sam, I know what Sam wants. I truly care what Sam wants. I truly care what the deans want. And that for me it saves me a lot of time and stress mapping things out because I've got knowledge about what you care about here. And it's more important than trying to figure out what you need from a Wikipedia page or your K10s. Like there's that weird element of interviewing that people like, I get it, but before interviews, I would prepare. But during the interview, I was paying attention to the person because that they were making a decision. It wasn't the company. Like, well, I know the company's done this, and that's why the company needs me. It's like, this is a person across from you. And they want to know what you're like riding down a river with, and if they want to work with you through that situation. And that's generally, I think, what makes the decision.
Yeah. So when you've interviewed talent or been interviewing yourself, what do you, well, more when you interview other people, what do you look for in talent?
I have not, I can be honest with you, I have not interviewed much, man. Like, not for positions that I haven't hired. I'm, again, small, minority-owned business. We don't got the money to burn on salaries outside of whatever I could take home yet. But I haven't been fortunate enough.
Okay, right. So you got a lot of your jobs without interviewing.
Well, no, on Wall Street, yeah, Goldman was 18 interviews, man. That boys, they interviewed the hell out of me. Merrill was a few, Morgan Stanley was a fellowship, so it was a little bit different. And then in every other one, whether it be with Equal or Evolution, there was 1 or 2 interviews, but there was always a warm introduction, number one. There was always a decision maker in the room. That's the one thing that, again, it's like, if you can, and it's one of those weird things because you have to look at the impact of your life and say, if I'm talking to a startup owner and they're a decision maker, right? And I impress that startup owner, I could have a job, right? If I'm talking to a recruiter from, I don't know, whatever, and I impress that person, I might still not have a job, right? So there's just that algebra of like, well, this, 5X versus 1X, right? Then what do I do with this conversation? And so that for me, it's like the rooms I've tried to be in are rooms where the people I think want to take this issue head on are point blank. And if I'm in a room with them and they're looking going, what is this guy here for? Then I have a chance to show them, I want to take it head on, but I'm not the one running the big company and this and that, this and that. Here's where I can fit in. And then oftentimes people will reveal to me later, oh, by the way, I'm doing this, or maybe you should come out and see it. And in a sense, they're interviewing me, but I'm just genuinely just following my, my spider senses to that person seemed pretty interesting. Oh, and it turns out that they're trying to do that, but nobody really is going to leave their job to go help them work on this random thing. But since I am interested in it, this is an opportunity for me to genuinely engage with this challenge. And therefore, and a lot of my clients now are in that space, right? They have a business, they're, $1 to $3 million in sales. And so they've got this thing that's working or this service, and now they need to expand. Well, it's just like training. Everything I've done is literally just training for this point because their failure is my failure, right? Like there's nothing that matters more than when you realize like you're sitting next to a CEO and what you do next affects if they survive the next round, right? And they know what you do next affects if they survive the next round. That's my lethal weapon. Like, that's my partner right there, because we are codependent and we are both fighting this honorable fight, but what I do matters. And that for me is a very important part of my day to day.
Cool. So we're at time, but I want to leave this with some advice and suggestions. And you've mentioned with a lot of the folks that you kind of coach or mentor or talk to, there are books that you suggest that they read or go to, or maybe some other tips. Mm-hmm. So what are some of the most recommended books that you provide, or tips, actionable advice that you give folks that come to you?
First of all, I'm a big fan of Harvard Business Review magazine. For anyone who...
You actually get the print.
Oh, dude, I got a stack, bro, every month.
I get the digital copy. Oh, okay, nice.
Yeah, I don't have, I get, if I want to read something and truly get into it, in my magazine, I got my little tab right here if I go to bed. Oh, that one's cool. Fall asleep reading it. And I guess the lessons stick. So I love them. Know How by Ram Charan. It's a book I read years ago.
Okay.
Excellent book. On my shelf, I keep Race, Work, and Leadership I'm a big fan. I think it's a great book for anyone who's thinking about, from the diversity space. You want some statistics and kind of insight into what's happening. Robert Cialdini, the psychology. Influence. Yeah. Robert Cialdini, I'm a big fan. I was a TA while at Columbia for behavioral economics. I worked under Eric Schoenberg. So I had the chance. I was blessed. Yeah, that's when the Ariely's and all those folks were starting to really dig in. And I had an opportunity because the market was burning down that's when I decided I wasn't going back to corporate. It was really,
I love behavioral economics. It's like the blend of economics and psychology. And it's how why people make stupid decisions or like illogical decisions.
As a trader, it was like, I was like, oh, I get this. I see this all the time. Lambda factors. And, people trying to assume they're rational is the most irrational thing. You're just not rational. Your decisions are based on subconscious kicks and habits and fears. And so for me, understanding that was critical. There's a book called The First Mile, and also Being the Boss. Excellent books. I think The First Mile is a lot of these, I'll be honest with you, are HB, Harvard Business Publishing Press, just because I worked with them for the last year and I just got boxes of books. So just reading through the stuff and loving it. And then, I have scattered around my office all kinds of books, but those ones. And then, for me, I do suggest A Book of Five Rings by Miyamoto Musashi. That's my some people are like, read The Art of War, Sun Tzu. Nope, read The Book of Five Rings. Yeah, it's probably my sixth time reading it, but great book. And then I think I'm currently reading The Hidden Psychology of Social Media Networks, but there's a book called The Hidden Psychology of Social Networks, I think, which again is back to understanding the mind. Like, why are people reacting this way to this technological phenomenon called TikTok? Right? It's like, oh, it's a meme, and just make it short and sweet, image and words. And scroll. We're wired in a certain way, and understanding the power of the meme and what it means to our minds is relevant to everyone, particularly digital marketers, but also for CEOs, because it's similar to what I said earlier about like the Michael Jackson. Like, when you take the whole story, Prince or any of them, and you package it up that way, the meme is that film on top or humor or whatever, the Betty White, all of those things. That's how we want to make the universe. We want to kind of boil it down into very digestible bits, and that's where the internet's headed, metaverse, all this other stuff. So understanding that is a very useful piece for, I think, anyone who ever sees themselves having to communicate kind of broad scale.
Dude, you just left us with so much insight and a whole lot more books for me to add to my Audible collection.
So I see you have the first 90 days.
Yeah.
Right there. That is one of the best books. Saved my way back in the day. Saved me.
Yeah. No, this is a good book. I read every time I start a new job.
Oh, yeah.
And I recommend this to people. This book from Harvard Business Press, Choosing Courage, it talks about, like, my takeaway from this is, you know what? If you choose courage at work and you stand up to authority, you got to be prepared to get fired.
That's my whole point.
Yeah.
And to my earlier thing about like why I'm like, I got to be authentic with my boss. It's that, there during the George Floyd phenomenon, people started coming out and complaining and da. My brother was shot when I was in college, and I'm working in a corporate firm, and my family's going through issues. I am not going to come into work every day acting, feeling, or being ready for your bullshit. And if you don't respect that, years later, you'll have the lawsuit from many people that you were just like insensitive. And it's because people are dealing with a lot of different things. Recognizing my situation, never realized maybe I'm not the best fit for you, but let me go ahead and leave you some advice so that when all these other people start to rah, you're not shocked. You're dealing with humans and you're trying to quantify us, but we're not quantifiable. And so I feel like those conversations are the ones that later on organizations are happy to pay a lot of money to have me explain to them some shit that they already knew. I'm like, you're trying to quantify people, right? Are you having the conversations where they can feel like their authentic selves? Because all these words are populated. I don't feel authentic. What's the word? The new fancy word, these words come and go. But there's a phrase now, negative. There's a term for how I feel like they did something negative to me. But these are all things I'm like, oh yeah, this is what everyone is scared to say. And if you're a real good CEO, you want to have somebody warn you 3-4 years ahead about it. And I think that's people like you and I, right? Where it's like, we should be able to, because we care about this company too, we care about you too, but there is a human element to this that if you're scared to communicate with people about it, it's just going to fester.
Yep.
And so management always has to take that reality that you can keep throwing us off the ship. Somebody's going to come by and pick us up. We'll survive. But you've got termites, you've got rats on board, you got a lot of issues. We should be able to say it in love and help the company get better. But, I just didn't feel like corporate America was ready for my brand of authenticity. And that's great because now they're ready for it as an outside consultant.
Yeah.
I don't have to deal with them every day.
No, yeah, I hear you, dude. I'm trying to do the same thing outside of the corporate world. Cool, dude. Well, Waz, awesome catching up with you. I think we could probably have done another hour or two.
Absolutely.
Thank you for everything. If people want to connect with you, is there a way that you prefer, or you're like, they just got to find you on their own?
Just ping me on LinkedIn. Say I saw you. I saw you on Alan's podcast. Basically, that's a warm intro as far as I'm concerned.
Cool, dude.
That wraps up another remarkable episode of the Sick Career Podcast with Alan Stein. Check out past episodes and other resources on the website. That's sickpodcast.com, and it's SYCK. Alan, tell the audience about the newsletter they can sign up for.
The newsletter rocks. Check out the Accelerator, XLR8R. You will get great tips about your career. You'll get honest insights. You will get the occasional pet picture. And you will learn how to take proactive control and take charge of your career.
Very good. Very good. That's sickpodcast.com, SYCK. For your host, Alan Stein, I'm Russ Reba, and we hope you've enjoyed today's episode. You are going to love the next one.